Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're continuing reading of Iqbal's Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. And last time we had covered a bit of this paragraph, but we'll just go through it quickly. Again, it is the inadequacy of the logical understanding. Starting from here. So it is the inadequacy of the logical understanding, conceptual understanding, which finds a multiplicity of mutually repellent individualities with no prospect for their ultimate reduction to a unity. Last time we saw that concepts unite, but unite by dividing. So they include, but that inclusion also require exclusion. And if there is only inclusion or exclusion, only exclusion, then there is no concept. So concepts have boundaries. But it's not clear. So mutually repellent individualities with no prospect of their ultimate reduction. So it doesn't seem to be bothered about reductionism. Ultimate reduction to unity. That makes us skeptical about the conclusiveness of thought, because in his eyes, if there's no overall unity between different aspects of being, then the thought is inconclusive. Maybe we'll spend some time on that, just a little bit. So we have individuals, and obviously we can take individuality at various levels. And for Iqbal, the problem with conceptual thinking is that it can't reduce these multiplicity of individuality into a real unity. So it's after unity. And reduction is the word. So that's the real unity. So for at most, the conception, as we'll see, of unity is organic unity. That's what he is looking for, organic unity. The universe probably should be seen as an organ or one whole, and the individual should be seen as part and parcel of this whole. And what conceptual thinking lacks is the conception of organic whole and the relationship between organ and this whole, which is a strange claim to make, because obviously we study biology based on concepts as well. But in a sense, at least since the late 19th century, one of the critique of the modern thinking has been it has been overly influenced by physics, because of the great works of Newton and the later physicists, and the prominence of physics in the whole modern natural philosophy. We only have to think about the mechanical worldview which prevailed in early and later 20th and 19th century. And the critique which developed of that sort of worldview were inspired by biological thinking. And that's even true of later critiques. So we can think of works, for example, we can think of even postmodernists. So what Iqbal is doing, and obviously Hegel and the whole Romantic movement was part and parcel of that sort of critique of the mechanistic worldviews. So what Iqbal is saying is not totally without precedent or without. So it's understandable, but so conceptual thinking is mostly the type of conceptual thinking which is practicing physical, mechanistic sciences and philosophies. And Iqbal's models seems to be more inspired by biological sciences and later non-mechanistic physical sciences. So that's why he would be very interested in quantum physics and relativity, Einstein relativity, and all those things. So this all makes sense in a way. What we can understand the motivation behind his critique here when he says that it is the inadequacy of the logical understanding which find the multiplicity of mutually repellent individuals with no prospect of their ultimate reduction to unity. So unity is talking about more like a biological unity. So that's, if not physiological unity. So that's the critique of conceptual thinking, or what he call logical understanding. So we need to not reject, but move away from conceptual thinking and come up with a type of thinking which is able to give us the idea of this type of unity, that is organic or physiological unity. So in fact, the logical understanding is incapable of seeing this multiplicity. So he's not rejecting the multiplicity as a coherent universe. And the view of coherence is his view, or his ideal anyway, seems to be biological, organic, physiological. So on the one hand, there are conceptual coherences or conceptual unity, which is not real unity, and on the other hand, there is organic unity, which is real unity. But what, in my view, he is ignoring is the fact that we don't have to look for unity in this way. We can understand relationship. So multiplicity, the question is why multiplicity needs to be reduced to some sort of unity. Of course, that is one of the ambitions of Western thinking since Aristotle, if not Plato and beyond. But I don't know why we need to seek unity and why we can't be content with understanding relationships without reducing them to a unity. And because any unity or conceptual unity has to ignore the differences which can't be reduced to a unity. And if why can't we have even if we just ignore our theistic understanding of the world, why can't we think of an open-ended universe? In other words, why can't we retain the difference between thought and being? I guess one of the problem with this is that thought is able to understand being, and so in a sense we need to understand the relationship between thought and being. Otherwise we have so relationship between thought and being. But with that sort of conception, the problem has been how thought can understand being. How can there be a relationship if they are totally different things? So one of the there has been, because of these sort of objection, there has been a thrust to a unity either through the thought side, which is idealism, or from the being side, which is realism. But we know that both idealism and realism have their problems. But that's the limitation of a particular type of thinking. And because Iqbal is working within that thinking, that sort of thinking, he cannot get out of that sort of mold as well, which would require him to consider a different type of unity. For example, like from in our own Islamic tradition, which will consider metaphysical unity as still working within the realm of creation. And the real unity will come through when we move to the realm of creator. Anyways, just a few different thoughts at this point, but not necessarily very coherent. So it is the inadequacy of the logical understanding which finds a multiplicity of mutually repellent individualities with no prospect for their ultimate reduction to unity, that makes us skeptical about the conclusiveness of thought. So evidently, Iqbal is in the idealistic camp in that sense. In fact, the logical understanding is incapable of seeing the multiplicity as a coherent universe, conceptual, because it cannot provide, cannot reduce the universe to a single whole, I guess, or single unity. Its only method is generalization. Well, generalization, if you are working with an empiricist tradition, but obviously Iqbal is subsuming here Kant's subjective idealism as Kant's transcendental idealism as well. So based on reason, but its generalizations are only fictitious unities because they are based on, well, either they are generalization or pure concepts. They are based on unities, but unities which ultimately divide as well. So in a sense, they take this type of thinking, take the problem to, or if they are working to solve that problem to just a different level. So before we had the question of the multiple unities or multiple individualities, and at the level of concept, now we have multiple concepts. So the problem of unity is still remains. So fictitious unit with no effect on the reality of the concrete things. So the conceptual, another problem with conceptual thinking, and here Hegel comes in again, is ultimately, so we have multiplicity of individual repellent individualities. So we have individuals or particulars, and then we have concepts. So there was the question of the unity in these multiplicities. So we came up with conceptual unities, but concepts are also multiple. So then the question is of the unity between concepts. And if now unity between concepts have two problems. You can have unity between concepts, for example, in Kant. So you have concepts and you have multiplicities of concepts. And unity is provided by ideas of reason in Kant, for example, because they provide unity among concepts. But ideas again are similar to concepts in the sense that they have just shifted the problem of unity at another level, because the ultimate problem still remains. And what is the ultimate problem? The difference between thought and reality or being, whatever you want to call it. So the whole unity is working conceptual as well as idea. Is working on the level of thought. But the question of the relationship between or unity between thinking and being, or thought and being, still remains in a Kantian thinking. That's why Kantian thinking, according to Iqbal and Hegel, cannot come up with an idea of a unity, real unity, because they have no concept of the unity of thought and reality. And for that, the solution by Iqbal and Hegel is to critique or to reject the fundamental distinction between thought and being, and see thought as just the unfolding of or expression of, or being as unfolding of or expression of the potentialities or possibilities dormant within the thought. So basic difference between thought and being becomes the difference between potentiality and actuality, the sort of difference Aristotle had, but with one difference, that in Aristotle, prime matter is beyond potentiality, actuality, divine in a sense, even though that seems very contradictory as well. And that resolves the. I mean that resolves the question of unity, but without actually addressing uh, the Kantian objections to it, or the general objection how we move from thought to being, or how do we know that being is actually an expression of a thought. So that question remains, but Hegel and Iqbal have their answers, obviously. And we will look at that in the next section always. Hopefully. Yeah, some of it anyway.